I woke up one morning in the middle of a crash and the depression that sometimes goes with that. And I just did a search on MECFF and mind body, and I came up with an interview with you. It was hard to believe. It was like, this is what I'm looking for. I had no idea it was out there. And I was just completely thrilled.
Marilyn Lemmon lived with chronic fatigue syndrome for 30 years. She didn't have the energy to do what she loved: hiking, biking, backpacking, and skiing. She believed in the mind-body connection, but she didn't know how to harness it. Today, I am happy to say that Marilyn has overcome ME/CFS and is back to her outdoor passions in Mount Shasta, California. I'm Rebecca Tolin, a mind-body coach and the creator of the Be Your Own Medicine course. At age 70, Marilyn feels a newfound zest for life. Today, we'll hear how she overcame 3 decades of debilitating symptoms. Marilyn, welcome.
Hi, Rebecca. It's so good to see you.
Oh, it's so great to see you. I'm really grateful that you're sharing your story. I know it's going to inspire a lot of people because you lived with ME/CFS for 30 years, and that's just monumental. You're a very strong person, clearly. But take us back to what your life was like before the CFS began, and then how your health and your life began shifting.
Yeah, so I was an avid bicyclist. I had done centuries, double centuries, racing, the whole bit. And I loved cross country skiing and backpacking and hiking. And then, like so many CFS patients, I was fine one day and not the next. So from there, I watched my exercise, which I just love so much, just slip away and slip away and slip away until it was gone. And I'm lucky that I've never been housebound, although I've gotten close to that during this 30 years. And, it was, of course, profoundly frustrating. The doctors couldn't help me at all. And I tried so many alternative things the way people do, and nothing helped at all except a mind body life event that I've told you about, which did help for a while, and that happened about 8-9 years ago, and that led me to, well, once that happened, I was desperate to concoct on my own or find somewhere some techniques to help with that, rather than just having a lucky life event make me better. What can I do on a day-to-day, in regular life to make this happen? And, I came up with absolutely nothing until I got kind of desperate one morning and found you on the internet. And my thought was, I don't know if this is going to work, but I have to try it.
Oh, Marilyn, it is just, when I think of living with CFS for 13 years, it just felt like an eternity. I really can't imagine 30 years. And I do want to get into this mind body life event. But before we do that, let's go back a little bit to where you said, one day you were okay and the next you weren't. Were there stressful events in your life? Did you suddenly crash? Did you get a virus beforehand? Or what was the onset of the symptoms like?
Yeah, I had, it was a number of stressful things about a year before I got symptoms. Um, I had a major surgery. I had a big wipeout on my bicycle with a concussion and broken bones. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. I was in grad school and having trouble with my thesis project and trouble with my marriage too. So there was a lot going on. And I guess suddenly my system just couldn't quite deal with all that.
That is just a huge perfect storm. That is a lot of stress. And It's not uncommon, as you know, for just emotional stressors in somebody's life to precede the symptoms. And after that point, would you say that you said there were periods you were homebound, but you basically couldn't exercise? What was it like at your worst, and what were the symptoms that were most prevalent?
Yeah, at my worst was in still quite a while ago, about 12 years ago. I had some little weird virus. I don't know what it was. It was fairly short, but I came out of that just, just substantially worse. And I wasn't actually homebound, but I felt like I was so close to it that it really scared me. And I didn't, it was really depressing. I actually had the thought of, if I'm like this from now till 5 years from now, I don't know if I'm going to want to live anymore. And I never had that kind of a thought before or
Yeah.
since. So that was the worst. My experience has been not a lot of ups and downs, which is more common, I think, but fairly steady. And so, I learned my limits and lived within them, and found found some things I really loved to do, which helped a lot. That I could still do
Yeah,
to
that's
replace
important.
the active outdoor life that I had lived.
Yeah, absolutely. And how were you coping with your emotional world during the hard times, but really just these 30 years? I mean, this was the prime of your life, and there had to be so much disappointment and grief and frustration and different emotions.
I don't know exactly. One does adjust, or usually, I mean, I did, and without really doing any specific techniques or anything like that. I just it helped a lot that I took up serious nature photography, because that was something that was extremely was and is very fulfilling. But yeah, mostly it was just kind of my psyche adjusting and taking care of the situation without seeking out any specific techniques or therapists or any of that.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's so much that happened in those 30 years, but I am curious about some of the main modalities you tried that didn't work, that doctors or other practitioners suggested.
Yeah, I didn't go down the Western medicine route too much, but some for sure. I went through a lot of treatment for Epstein-Barr. I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of people. It did, just absolutely nothing. I tried homeopathy, acupuncture, uh, Ayurvedic medicine, a lot of stuff like that, endless supplements. I can remember early on going going to visit my aunt and bringing this suitcase full of 20 bottles of supplements, and you just during the first maybe couple of years that I had it. Um, so and then I just kind of stopped doing it. It was just discouraging that I've tried this, that, and the other, and nothing helps. And why bother going going back to the doctor? So I just stopped all of that stuff.
I can relate to that. I did
Yeah,
a lot of treatments for Epstein-Barr, even antiviral medications in intravenous form. And I just crashed after that. And
yeah,
interestingly, the Epstein-Barr um, titers supposedly went down, but I didn't feel any better, which became evident that was not the cause of the symptoms, even though I
yeah,
know a lot of people are told that. So I'm
yeah.
really glad that you brought that up. Now, you did already allude to at one point, I think about 8 years ago, you had this mind body experience that sort of turned you on to the idea that these symptoms could shift and that there was a mind body connection. So, do you want to tell us about that?
I got MBCF stuff when I was in grad school, and I decided after a while I just needed to drop out. And so that's what I did. And what I was going to do when I got my PhD was to go to New Zealand. Well, I never got the degree. So that trip didn't happen. So some years later, I decided to go with my husband and my brother to New Zealand, and it was this trip that had been, yeah, I've been thinking about it for 15 years or something at that point. And plus it just, I had picked it out because of all the places in the world I haven't been. That's where I want to go, and so we went, and I was trying to be conscientious about helping with the driving on the little left side of the road. And 5 days into it, I just had this horrible crash, MECSF crash. I was actually driving in one of the little towns there, and it just came on. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. It just came on, boom, where I just felt horrible and could barely steer the car back to the hotel. Um, anyway, that evening, I just felt um, horrible physically, mentally. I'd ruined the trip for myself. I'd ruined it for I don't have any kids, so for the two dearest people in my life, my brother and my husband. And so I just went to bed. And the next morning, um, we were going to see the kiwi birds at this sanctuary. They're very hard to see in the wild, and I really, I when else in my life am I going to be able to do this? So I went, and this was in a transport chair because that's the way. Um, I went through the airport and all that was in a transport chair. But I felt quite a bit better. And by that evening, I said, "Yeah, I'm up to going out to dinner." And we had actually gotten on a plane and flown from North Island to South Island. And I felt fine to go out to dinner after a crash that would have laid me low for a week and a half easy. So I was just like, oh my gosh, what? This is incredible. And I went on to, be fine for the rest of the trip. It was another over a week that we were there. And then once I got home, I started, I could just feel there was something different, and I started to slowly ease back into, going to the grocery store and stuff like that. And eventually, I started walking again, which I hadn't in the longest time. But then, it would start slipping away. And so I'd plan another trip, and it kind of worked. And then it would start slipping away again. And that's sort of the way it went.
Oh, it's set to me from the mind body lens. This is such a powerful example of how our brain can turn on and off symptoms based on its perception of danger or its perception of safety. And we essentially are showing our subconscious brain what we're capable of, both through our actions and through our mood. This is not to say it's our fault because we can't control our subconscious brain. Um, but to me, it sounds like you were so enjoying yourself and you wanted to take this trip so much that your brain determined it really wasn't useful to have symptoms and to warn you of danger anymore. I'm kind of curious how you took it. What meaning did you make of this? And especially now, since you've taken Be Your Own Medicine and learned about mind body healing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I concluded, back then was that I refer to it as a push come to shove situation where my system, my subconscious brain, were like, we have to function. This trip is really, really important. You're messing up this great vacation for the people you care about most in the world. And yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. And
Yeah, amazing. I think a lot of
yeah,
times too, I mean, the brain we know is based on efficiency. And so it gets in its patterns and it just repeats the same patterns until there's some interruption. And there's this awareness like, we've really got to perform here. This is important for me to be able to explore with my loved ones. So, okay, let's fast forward then to really the turning point in your recovery journey. You said you had just found me and my work on the internet through a Google search.
I was just getting worse again. Um, and I was just really, really frustrated by it. And I woke up one morning, you know, in the middle of a crash and the depression that sometimes goes with that. And I just did a search on MECFF and mind body, and I came up with an interview with you, and it was maybe a 45-minute, fairly lengthy interview. And I just felt like it was hard to believe. It was like, this is what I'm looking for. I had no idea it was out there. And I was just completely thrilled. It was like I'd waved a magic wand or something. I kid you not. There you were. I had to wait, a couple months till the course started, but I just knew that I had to try it. Yeah.
Wow. So you really got this intuitive feeling like this is what I'm looking for. And you
Yeah.
found it and could hardly believe it. And then you signed up for my Be Your Own Medicine self-paced course. It was just when I was starting that. And so tell me what started shifting inside of you with the teachings and the practices.
Well, I had an interesting experience to me anyway. Just 10 days into it, I felt I can remember a couple days in a row at the end of the day, when you usually feel tired, just as I was going to bed, I felt really physically good in a way that I used to when I was an avid cyclist. And it's like, this has to mean something, was my feeling about it. And then the way you talk about dealing with fatigue, which, post exertional malaise was my big, big symptom. That's like 90% of the issue with me over the years. And yeah, so I just, started doing the techniques and creeping out there to walk to the mailbox and back and quickly discovered that I really had tools now to deal with the symptoms that of course did come up to some extent. I know that a lot of people have a lot of ups and downs with it, but for me it's been a pretty steady improvement. Another thing is that I wasn't expecting is just tools for dealing with strong emotions. And I had a lot of strong emotions about MECSF more than anything. A lot of anger about the 30 years of life and all the things I could have done and didn't, and also all the dismissal that I've always gotten really good support from the people I'm really close to, but from coworkers and neighbors, and the course has some just excellent techniques for dealing with that, and I wasn't expecting that at all, and that's been really good.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's several things I want to piece out here. So first of all, you said you've just experienced a steady improvement. of your well-being. And I wondered if you could describe that a little more. What kind of symptoms have resolved or lessened, and what other kind of increases in energy or health have you experienced?
I remember pretty early on, these things don't happen overnight. It does take some time, but maybe within the first couple, 3 months when I was starting to walk, I was making it to the next door neighbor's driveway and back. And these are fairly good sized lots here. And I just felt like that was pretty amazing. So early on, it was just this feeling of, careful, slow, steady improvement. And with the tools I had for dealing with the symptoms, I would get up, like the next day and have some little bit of symptoms and just go off and do my thing, go to the grocery store or the dentist or whatever. And without worrying about it, the worry wasn't there. I was really confident that just go. This is fine. And then since that first 2 or 3 months, I've hardly had any symptoms at all. That's the truth. I get the occasional little twinge in my lymph nodes. I'm sure that's something that CFS people can relate to, those little pains that, isn't quite normal. But that's the only thing I can really think of going back some months now. I don't have symptoms. Now, I probably would if I went out and did a really long hike or something. I'm only doing short hikes, but I don't really have them anymore.
That's really incredible. After 30 years that you endured ME/CFS, after a few months, you don't really have symptoms. And that to me shows this was the right remedy for you, right? This really described the cause of your symptoms and gave you the tools to work with it, and it resonated, which is amazing. I remember you emailing me over the months several times, and we were in touch, and you just seemed so excited. You were describing this euphoria going back out on nature hikes. What was that like to start exploring the world again?
It was incredible. So, my husband and I took a trip to the Canadian Rockies last fall. When we got to the Calgary airport and we got our luggage, and we walked 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 and we walked. And there was a shuttle, but we didn't know about it. And the rental cars were like, it seemed like miles away. And my husband was walking beside me, um, wondering, how is she doing? And the answer was fine. I had like a normal kind of fatigue that night because I'm not used to towing the heavy luggage for a long way in that airport. But I was completely fine the next day. And then we did this amazing hike in Marble Canyon. People who have been there, I'm sure, did that. It's a very touristy place because it's so beautiful. So, the trails were pretty packed, and there were these Chinese tourists, one of them taking a photo of the group. So, and I'm just, on cloud nine because I've got my little backpack on and I'm hiking up this trail, and it's been so freaking long since I've done this. So I see these Chinese tourists and hey, let me take your picture. And they're just all smiling and I'm smiling. And I could just sense as I'm a shy person, but I was interacting, talking to some of these other hikers, and I could just sense them picking up how happy I was. And we were all just saying how this is such an incredible place and it's so beautiful. And, I was telling them, go all the way up. There's a cool waterfall up there. You don't want to miss it.
I can feel your emotions now. It's almost like because you were so deprived for so many years that you were enjoying it even more, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always been a hiker. Well, I've always loved the mountains. That's why I live in the mountains now. And just to be back on a mountain trail, in spite of all the cycling I did, which I totally loved, there's my whole life, there's no place I'd rather be than on a mountain trail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so you're back there, you're doing hikes now,
I'm
it
back
sounds
there.
like on a regular basis.
Well, not so much right now because it is winter here. But I'm doing, some pretty good walks
Mhm.
every day, every single day. I get annoyed uh, if something comes up that's going to interfere with that. Um, yeah, because my body is just in love with exercise, always has been. And when I'm out there, I can just feel how much my body is just loving it. My mind too, of course, my mind and emotions. Yeah.
Oh, this is just incredible, Marilyn. I feel so happy for you and inspired by you. So I want to talk about what made this possible. There is a practice in the course called graded exposure, which is a form of exposure therapy that different modalities use. How did you expand your activity? What was that like for you?
I just did what my body told me to do, basically. And it was, a pretty gradual increase. And it took me, I got up to a mile or so after about 5 months, I guess. And then I got, when I was working up to a mile and a half, um, I got kind of stuck by kind of a stiffness in my hip joints, so that I would feel like I needed to take off every third or fourth day. And I was annoyed by this. Maybe it's probably just old age and whatever. But what I did was I started doing the physiological sigh on the walk. And the first time I did it for the whole walk, which sounds a bit
Great.
crazy. But I did it for the entire walk. It was about a half an hour walk. And I got back to the car just feeling absolutely euphoric again from doing that. I always felt good after the walks, but this was just crazy euphoric. And that solved the problem. I was going walking every day, and I really wasn't getting that stiffness anymore. So that was pretty interesting.
I love that you use the tools in a creative way, right? Because that's one of the practices I introduced, the physiological sigh, and you really used it in this more extended way and saw, okay, this works. And that's one thing I like to do is offer this kind of mix and match toolkit that people can choose what really matters and works for them. But actually, I'd like to go back a bit to the knowledge because for most people, understanding that they are not sick or broken beyond repair is really important. And understanding the science that this is a process happening in our brain and nervous system through learned neural pathways is important. So I'm curious for you, Marilyn, what was the knowledge or the teachings from the course that really kind of helped you make this pivot into um, feeling more safe in your body and mind, and then challenging yourself?
Well, I already was very clear it was a mind body thing. So there was no problem with, I didn't have to make that shift. I guess most people do. And I would definitely say to people, be open minded about this. So, in terms of feeling safe, I guess it was more than anything having the toolkit to deal with the symptoms, because like anybody who's had MECSF for much time at all, I hate those symptoms. I just I still do. I guess I'm sort of not supposed to, but I still do. And having that toolkit of how to deal with them when they happen was huge in calming down the fear of them and the anger towards them too. And of course, that helped them not happen in the first place. So, yeah.
And, one of the somatic practices we use is somatic tracking, which is actually retraining our brain that the sensations in our body are safe and that our body is safe. And so we don't really need these sensations. So, which tools were really significant for you?
I do open somatic tracking and somatic tracking a lot, more than anything with those. I do the feeling emotions sometimes. It was interesting to me just through that, there were some strong emotions that needed to get out, and they got out, and I don't need to work, they're out. I don't have,
You release them and you don't
yeah,
need the symptoms so much, or you don't
yeah,
have to dwell in that rumination.
right.
Did want to get back to that with the emotions, because you said that was a part of the course that surprised you, that there was a lot of different practices, including writing practices as well, on feeling emotions. And I'm sure you did have many emotions. Like you said, you couldn't stand the symptoms and what they stole from you. So, what was your experience like exploring some of these emotions?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the expressive writing kind of stuff I found very valuable. It was something that I did, yeah, a tiny bit beforehand, but not much at all. And it's definitely a regular practice. You know, I scribble about any little thing that comes up. Before it was, only the really big stuff occasionally. This time it's just anything little thing that comes up, especially, before bed. If you got some little thing nagging at me, I'll scribble about that, or even occasionally in the middle of the night. It's just, don't turn on the light. You just scribble. Can't read it the next morning, but who cares? It's out of your system, and
Yeah.
that really helps. So I was really grateful to be, encouraged to do that practice. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, this practice I've developed called Scribble Your Secrets is really based on expressive writing, but we're just getting out our deepest, darkest, most frustrated feelings. And sometimes we don't even have to write it out. Like, we can just scribble on the page. And then also really calming the nervous system after that and bringing in self-compassion. The self-compassion is important for a lot of people, because a lot of us, I would say just about all of us with these symptoms, tend to have that TMS personality where we're really hard on ourselves. And I'm curious, Marilyn, how has your journey been from shifting from self-criticism or self-pressure into self-compassion?
I'm not a very self-critical person, so it's not something I needed to really work on very much. Although I certainly enjoyed doing those practices, and I do them here and there. Um, I'm a people pleaser for sure. And so that's been good to explore and think about. And I find myself noticing it a lot more in other people as well, that they don't need to fix fix everybody, or that, take on everybody else's problems. And yeah.
Yeah, through this journey, have you found that you have learned or are learning, because I know it's a work in progress, to be concerned about your feelings and needs rather than just pleasing others?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember telling you this a few months back, that I was together with my brother and husband that I went on the trip with, and spending some time where my brother lives some distance away, and that I basically told them, neither one of whom cooks, that the better I feel, the less I want to cook. You're going to have to deal with it. And I definitely am more attuned to, if I really don't feel like doing something, that's fine. Don't do it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's a lesson of a lifetime. That really is.
Yeah.
What else have you learned about yourself on this journey of mind body healing?
I don't express those strong emotions. And obviously I do it now in a safe way when other people aren't around. But it's been really important to express, however you can. I mean, occasionally, I've only done this maybe 2 or 3 times, but getting in the car, my husband totally understands all this stuff. He's um, in the, on a dark evening and driving somewhere to make some noise and then come back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just let it out, right?
yeah,
Better out than in.
yeah.
It's incredible how simple that is,
Mhm.
yet it's profound. And we're really trained out of doing that. I think women, especially, are not supposed to show anger, and it can make a huge difference in the amount of pressure that we're holding inside versus letting out. That's fantastic. So, yeah, for people who are dealing with ME/CFS, long COVID, or any of these other conditions, they'll often email us and say, I just don't think I can recover because I've had this for so many years, or I'm over 50 and your recovery stories are all with super young people. And Marilyn, I want to say that, you've just had your 70th birthday, as you told me. And so you're really an inspiration that even after 3 decades of ME/CFS, that you can recover and fairly quickly. So what would you want to say to people who are struggling with symptoms still?
The main thing I want to say is that, I totally get the resistance to psychological diagnoses that we patients have. I've had those too. I went to a psychiatrist early on when the student health at the school I was going to couldn't figure me out, and we really all resented. Uh, we deeply resented that, and this is something quite different from that in my mind. And more than anything, whatever works. It doesn't matter what it is. Please be open-minded to whatever works. And this is, it, as I understand it, not knowing much about it, but it's not really something that psychiatrists and psychologists know about. It's something quite different. And it taps into a lot of kind of Eastern traditions with meditation and breathing techniques. And they're powerful techniques. They're A lot of us have tried, DNR and things like that. Just the one technique. This is a smorgasbord of techniques, and different techniques work for different people and all that. But these are powerful techniques. They're not just some little one technique approach. There's a lot of them out there, and some of them will, I think will work for a lot of patients. And I want you guys to try it.
Yeah. And I also want to say, because I know you have a very scientific mind and background, this approach is now very evidence based. It's based on new neuroscience that has not yet trickled into the practice of medicine, but that shows us the same emotional centers in the brain light up when we have emotional stress as when we have physical stress. And that can create chronic symptoms. These are stored and learned in the brain pathways. So there's a lot of evidence too, and there's studies showing that this approach works, both the knowledge and the practices. So I really appreciate that the practices were really pivotal for you, and sometimes it's just a combination of both for most people. I wonder, in closing, Marilyn, if you could just kind of describe how you're feeling today and how your life is expanding compared to what it's been for the 3 decades prior.
Oh gosh. Yeah, just just being able to do more stuff in general. Obviously the exercise is particularly important to me, but I never got much brain fog, but here and there it would happen, and it just doesn't happen at all anymore. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I used to slow them down a little bit when I listened to them. I never do that anymore. I used to take a drug, doxepin. I'm sure a lot of MECFS people are on that drug for sleep. I don't take it anymore. I don't need it. And just, some things that I know I've got more energy for cooking. I just don't want to put it in that direction. And I have a nice feeling of this is your life. Go out and live it.
That is so beautiful, so inspiring. I'm really happy for you and inspired by you, Marilyn. Thank you so much for sharing your story. As you can hear, it is possible to go from having 3 decades of MECFS to taking mountain hikes again. I share lots of different recovery stories and pointers on how to recover on this YouTube channel. So subscribe and receive my new content, and let us know what you thought of this video in the comments. I read and appreciate every single one. If you want the same step-by-step course that Marilyn took, I offer Be Your Own Medicine as a self-paced program and as a live cohort. You can learn more about that at RebeccaTolin.com. But no matter what, remember that you can be your own medicine.